Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that 2026 have been off to a good start for you. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to today's Global Network webinar, the first to kick off this new year. My name is Panyan Yu from the United Nations Statistics Division, and I will be moderating this webinar with my colleague Alexander Loschke. Today, we are delighted to welcome Tarek Abou Chabake, Grace Sanico Steffan, and Lauren Herby of UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and they will speak on the topic of From Data to Impact, Advancing Action and Accountability in the Global Refugee Response. Data go far beyond mere measurement. It is a driving force for progress and accountability in the global refugee response. This webinar will delve into how robust data analysis not only tracks the international community's journey towards the objectives of the Global Compact on Refugees, but also flags emerging risk and empowers timely, informed action. Discover how data can function as both a compass to guide collective efforts and an early warning system to keep goals on track. Our colleagues at UNHCR will present key insights from their latest Global Compact on Refugees indicator report, as well as introduce their forthcoming refugee data portal, which is expected to launch this year. Let me now introduce our three speakers. First, we have Tarek Abou Chabake, who is UNHCR's Chief Statistician. He oversees and coordinates the implementation of UNHCR's Global Statistical Program of Work, ensuring that corporate and international statistical standards are applied throughout the organization's statistical system. Tarek has more than 25 years of professional experience in the main areas of statistics and demography in various UN entities. Grace Sanico Steffan is a Senior Statistics and Data Analysis Officer at UNHCR and Principal Drafter of the Global Compact on Refugee, or GCR, indicator report. She has more than 15 years of experience in indicators and statistics related to sustainable development and human rights. At the national, regional, and international levels, she has worked on work including population groups at risk of being left behind in national statistical systems. And Lauren Herby is a Statistics and Data Analysis Officer at UNHCR's Global Data Service. Her work focuses on the identification, standardization, and publication of data on forcibly displaced and stateless people. She is managing the development of the organization's new indicator platform. Before we proceed, just a few housekeeping reminders. This event will last for 1 hour. Our speakers will present for about 35 to 40 minutes, and we will then have a Q&A session following their presentation. Throughout their presentation, please do feel free to write any comments or questions you may have into the chat box. And during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar, you are encouraged to ask your questions directly by using the raise hands function. If you cannot speak, of course, we're very happy to read out your questions for you, but we do prefer live interactions during the Q&A session. And as I mentioned earlier, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Global Network LinkedIn group. We invite you to continue the discussion there after this webinar. And with that, let me now turn the floor to first presenter, Tarek. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and hello everybody. Hello from Geneva. As you've heard, I'm UNHCR's Chief Statistician based in Geneva, and as such, I run the statistics team. So on behalf of the entire stats team, welcome to this webinar from the UNHCR side. I will be relatively short, in only a minute or two, because Grace and Lauren are the real stars of today's webinar. But allow me to put this webinar a bit into context. Unfortunately, it's no secret that the humanitarian sector was hit quite badly by funding cuts in 2025, has been all over the media, of course. And as such, we are unfortunately no different at UNHCR but also within our broader data and statistics work within the organization, which was also negatively impacted by the funding cuts in 2025. But this means also at the same time, it is now even more important than ever to speak about data with data at hand, meaning a refugee life seen through the eyes of statistics. That's our job, our day-to-day job. And that's what pretty much Grace and Lauren are going to speak about in a few minutes, presenting on the one side the indicator report on the Global Compact on Refugees, but also the Refugee Data Portal, which is entirely about data. 2025 also saw the end of our, what we used to call our data transformation strategy, which ran from 2020 to 2025, which means we're at the end of a cycle in the data arena here, which means we are early 26. So we will be embarking on a new data strategy as UNHCR. So in the work that the Global Compact basically embraces, but also our Refugee Data Portal will be one of several cornerstones as we develop our data strategy in 2026. And both Grace and Lauren are going to speak to it, of course, in more detail. Last but not least, you may have heard the news. We have a new High Commissioner. He just started on 1st of January, his new mandate. It's a 5-year mandate. And believe it or not, he is a statistician. So for us, it's exciting news because we have someone from our community who is at the top of the organization. So in other words, let's see what the future will bring. For us, for sure, one thing is for sure, the future is bright, the future is statistics. And now let me pass on the floor to Grace and Lauren, who are the real stars of this webinar. Over to you.
Thank you, Tarek, for that kind introduction, calling us stars. As Tarek mentioned, what we wanted to share here with you is our experience using data to inform the implementation of the Global Compact on refugees. And I think a lot of the things that we will probably share with you are nothing new to your sector, probably more advanced in using data, not just data for itself, but to drive accountability and action. But with the Global Compact of Refugees, this is something that we kind of relatively new and still and strengthening. So let me begin by explaining what is the Global Compact of Refugees. So this is essentially a framework where UN member states agree how to improve global refugee response by looking at fair, predictable responsibility sharing that supports host communities, empowers refugees themselves. And this was affirmed in 2018. What is interesting about the compact is that its data is not an add-on. It is really woven into the architecture of the compact itself. So it did not only create a vision for the global refugee response, it also established a data-driven cycle of accountability and decision making. So this is what you see in this slide. This is a 4 cycle of action under the GCR, where it really started by first establishing an indicator framework. So after was affirmed in 2018, a year later, the indicator framework was established, which really served as the backbone to inform the implementation. So we have 16 indicators under the framework. They're not meant to be exhaustive, but they capture the key dimensions of collective progress under the 4 objectives of the compact. So whether that would be around inclusion, protection, or support to host countries. And so, like I said, they are deliberately built into the compact so that the political dialogue is anchored in a shared and transparent evidence base. And every 4 years, there is what we call the Global Refugee Forum, where states and the GCR stakeholders come together to advance the compact. And here, the indicator framework, the report, the indicator report informs the types of high impact commitments, or what we call pledges, that states and other stakeholders make. that help reveal where responsibility sharing needs to be strengthened. So evidence also helps shapes the ambition, further ambition of how it will be implemented. And in between these forums, which happen every 4 years, there is what we called the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review. One just took place in December here in Geneva, where essentially it's a meeting to take stock. So we're looking at which of the pledges have been implemented, are the commitments actually translated into real improvements for refugees and host communities? And again, the indicator report and the data that we gathered through the GCR indicators feed directly into these assessments, and they help states understand where adjustments would be required. And this is a continuous implementation. So we start again another 4-year cycle where we keep improving and shaping the implementation of the compact. And so with that kind of like continuous cycle, we better align with what is the evolving needs, the risks, the opportunities, because the evidence is carried forward. And actually we see that in the latest the last one that happened in December in the progress review, because our data analysis have shown that there were a lot of changes that happened. So essentially, data is not really separate from the politics, from the policy implementation of the compact. It is structurally integrated into its implementation. So very briefly about the third report that was used to inform the last Global Refugee Progress Review in December. This is the third edition of the report. It builds, of course, on, like I said, this continuous cycle. We had reports in 2021 and 2023. And so we have incorporated updated data and refined our methodologies, giving us a stronger evidence base and a much deeper picture of the key trends without requiring to refer back to earlier reports. So like where data was possible, we included data from 2016 to mid-2025, so a decade, allowing us to track progress. And the purpose, like I said, is to track progress on the 4 objectives of the GCR. To see if there are disparities among countries hosting refugees and offering durable solutions, reflecting both their contributions and the varying capacities and resources of countries. So to ensure reliability across the 16 indicators, we draw from multiple sources, and Lauren will talk about how our forthcoming refugee data portal really helped us to have a look at these different sources, and how it also helped us to mitigate some of the data gaps that we have, our issues on timeliness, limited coverage, limited disaggregation, especially on indicators that are measuring inclusion. And so where needed, we also complemented our data analysis with qualitative insights, as we will see in this next slide. So here we just wanted to kind of like share with you some of the tools that we have used to further strengthen our data analysis as a tool for advancing action in strengthening accountability in the global refugee response. So our aim in the report was not merely to present numbers, but to transform complex information into insights that policymakers or partners, including refugees themselves, can clearly understand and act upon. And so we use data storytelling to help us frame evidence in ways that we hope are meaningful, memorable, and actionable. So through this data storytelling, it helped us really sharpen our narrative around where progress is being made, where it is lagging, and what implications are for international responsibility sharing. So by weaving together data analysis and human-centered narratives, we sought to ensure that evidence doesn't sit passively on the pages of the report. I hope that it helped us really ensure its readability, prompts reflection, informs decisions, and ultimately we hope to drive a collective action that the compact is calling for. So some examples that we use. So for example, here data and insights. Like I mentioned, we brought together different data sources from other UN agencies, national statistical offices, UNHCR operational data, and other international data sets. So on their own, these sources, this data give us a partial view, but when we combine them, we're able to build a far more complete and hopefully more nuanced picture of what is happening across the refugee response. So you would see sorry for example in this first example that we have here, we are combining different data sources that allows us um, to compare global wealth and refugee hosting. And in the second example, we're looking at trends over time that allowed us to detect early warning signals. So this is what I talked about. We all know what happened in 2025 with the decrease in international aid, and that kind of trends allows us to um, signal this and make sure that concrete actions happen. So we will see where pressures were emerging, where systems were showing signs of stress, and where progress may be slow or even reversing, where it's essential for us to timely guide the evidence action. So that's data in insight. So next, we also try to transform very complex information into what we hope would be something clearer and accessible for our readers. So our aim was to present our analysis in a way that policymakers, GCR stakeholders, and refugees themselves could understand and use. So here, for example, we have used data visualization and simplified measures to allow us to show long-term trends, shifts in hosting patterns, and disparities between countries. And we introduce simplified metrics. So in this one, for example, where you see in 2024, countries with just 27% of global wealth hosted 80% of world refugees. So this is a simplified Gini-Lawrence curve measure for responsibility sharing that allowed us to illustrate the imbalance in this responsibility sharing and what we hope a single and more intuitive measure. Next, we also use key points. So in the report, we work closely with policy experts across UNHCR and of course our GCR stakeholders to help us identify key points that matter for advancing the objectives of the compact. And as you know, this could be quite a difficult dialogue sometimes, explaining the insights from the data and how could that be really translated into clear policy relevance. So for the report, we tried to distill these findings. We have like 7 headline policy recommendations, which are more high-level directions that speak to where international support, where responsibility sharing, and national inclusion efforts need to go next. So they're designed more for like senior decision makers and to help inform the next cycle of commitments under the compact. But we also didn't stop at broad recommendations. We also made practical guidance and actionable, like 23 key actions under the report. So these are more like concrete steps that governments, different stakeholders, and our office can take to strengthen protection, expand inclusion, improve financing, and reinforce the systems that support refugees and host communities. So what we try to do is really combine this strong evidence with clear, targeted advice. So we aim to ensure that the report doesn't just describe the progress, but it directly supports policy decisions needed to accelerate it. Next, we try to come up with a compelling narrative. So we try to distill that into a clear call to action for states and GCR stakeholders during the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review meeting that happened in December. So it became like this message that resonated throughout that meeting. So in the here you will see an example of a call to action by our High Commissioner, for example. So we in that meeting we saw that it was a clear call to action was picked up and amplified by many senior officials, including our High Commissioner, of course, as well as other actors and refugees themselves kept referring to some of the insights from the report, and so it was a good way for us to drive real momentum and visibility and to ensure that the meeting was really driven by the evidence. And last, we have included the human touch. So we try to put human impact stories. We also used artwork from refugees themselves throughout the report to bring in their perspective. So and what we want to do as we look into the next cycle of the report, we're working towards stronger methods, greater use of national statistics, more subnational and disaggregated data, and more visibility of groups that are more at risk of being left behind. And so, like I mentioned in the earlier, we try to do that really with the support of this refugee data portal that my colleague Lauren will now present to you, where we hope that that would make our data more accessible, more interactive, useful for analysis, programming, and advocacy. So I pass it on to you, Lauren, to present the portal.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Yeah, so this is a nice segue into what we're working on that should come the quarter two, sorry, of 2026 is the new refugee data portal. And the rationale behind this portal is, let me see if I can, is there's four main rationales behind this portal. And the first and foremost one is to fill an open data gap. UNHCR publishes population statistics, both official population statistics biannually and operational statistics on a more high frequency basis through two of our existing portals. We publish anonymized version of survey microdata on our microdata library. We publish resettlement statistics, and we have our flagship analytical reports, as Grace just mentioned. The Global Compact of Refugees Indicator Report has a lot of rich macro aggregated data in there, as well as other reports that we publish. But we don't have a place in the public domain where we share these macro aggregates, these indicators and statistical data in a organized format, sort of a database where people can find them. But this data is there. It's in the survey microdata, in the surveys. It's in coming out of our survey outputs. It's also coming more and more out of administrative data and censuses and national surveys. And so this gap we wanted to fill. Many of the indicator platforms that exist touch on the same indicators. However, they don't have this disaggregation that we need, which our main disaggregation is the population type, so refugees, asylum seekers, and other populations affected by forced displacement, and as well as statelessness. So yeah, that little white box is the open data gap we're trying to fill. In addition, we want to improve the user experience. Like I said, we have many data platforms or bits of our existing data websites where we feed data. We have our main UNHCR website. We have the current refugee data finder, which is where we publish our official statistics and our population statistics and resettlement statistics. We have our operational data portal where we have a lot of our operational population statistics, and we have the microdata library. And the idea behind the refugee data portal is to kind of bring everything together and have an enhanced user experience so that people can access all of these different content in one place with a human-centered design. So combining narrative and the data itself for those more technical users that want to get in and find exactly what they're looking for. And to align this new portal with accessibility standards as we know more about them today. We also want to enhance our interoperability for our very technical partners on the call. You might appreciate that the kind of SDMX standards where you have a set of defined dimensions of which you can compare data across different data series or different indicators. And so we have identified a set of kind of core and extended dimensions, and we're working to map all of the data that we want to have on this portal to align against these dimensions where it's possible so that we can bring more data together and do more correlation analysis, more time series analysis for data that were very patchy and comparisons against different population groups and across time. And of course, we're modeling it against the SDMX standards. It is a challenge, I will say, especially in the type of work that we are in, because we do have varying levels of disaggregation depending on the data source. Some of our data was collected really for through a survey for a specific purpose in the field, and they have very high levels of disaggregation, where others are more high level and whatnot. So bringing it together, it's hard to piece, one thing that it's more of we only have national coverage, whereas other we have subnational, but it hasn't yet been aggregated to national. Also, the data formats are very different coming in. Depending on the source, and the coding of the data can be different. So some of these standard dimensions, such as age, sex, disability, setting, so in settlements versus out of settlements, can use different codes. And there's a whole methodological work behind going and mapping those different codes and making sure that they're talking about the same thing, not to mention the actual indicator or data series itself. The methodology isn't the same. So it's a challenge. But at the same time, we see it as a huge opportunity because we are seeing ways to bring together our kind of robust and official statistics, and as well as our operational data through a kind of a common data model that's also kind of agnostic to indicator framework. So we believe that this will open up doors in the future for more analysis. And then finally, another rationale is to kind of leapfrog into more advanced technology and be API first. So building reusable and integrated building blocks. We're using an open source headless CMS. We plan to integrate MCP servers and AI-enabled search, and this will really open up the data in a way that it can be integrated into different types of analysis, different formats of analysis, and reporting. And we think that'll make us really fit for the future and leverage the data for a greater impact. So for this statisticians and data wranglers on the call, I just thought I'd highlight a little bit of the statistical work that goes behind the data portal to get it out there into one fine package. And really the three main pillars of it are we've defined quality standards. UNHCR has recently published our statistical quality assurance framework, which we are operationalizing with our curation work, which I'll talk about next. We have defined statistical methods for aggregation, and we'll build more. We are set define definitions for each of our data series, for each of our time series. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a standard set of cross-series dimensions. So things such as population types and setting, so that things can be comparable. And below in the pink box, I mentioned the tools that we have built behind it to support these definitions. So our quality assurance framework, and then standardized data dictionaries and metadata documentation. And then also, there's the curation work. And this is a big piece of work where we identify the data sources, where they exist, and we map them against our quality standards and our definitions to make sure that they're comparable over time and the data is robust enough. And then align against kind of the standardized data model and SDMX so that it can be compared with other data sources and perform data enrichment. So if there is potential to aggregate, we prefer it to be in the data before it comes in, but if we can, if it needs to be done post hoc, that's something that we have some methodologies for, and we can work with the data providers to do. And then finally, and for that, we do have internal guidance and policies around data curation. And finally is the publication. And so, standard workflows for authorizing publication, for documentation, for documenting the metadata, footnotes, annotations around each data source, and then linking the related sources. So with the new data portal, we want to achieve that you can link the microdata to macro aggregates, to reports, and any other data products that were built from this data. And this will help the user experience to, when they say, I want this data, they can find to what level of granularity they're actually looking for. And the main output and the main support for that will be the Refugee Data Portal. So how can you benefit from this initiative, and how can you contribute? Firstly, you can share your data with us. If you have some data that you think would be relevant for it, for this portal, specific to forcibly displaced populations or situations, or stateless people or situations, please share it. And we want to work with you to curate it and get it up there. And then we beg you to use the data. I mean, the open data is there for us to learn more and to understand more about this phenomenon. So it's there for you to use. And we also love for people to share their analysis, to share their reports, to share their results, so we can also learn. One of the challenges we do have with the microdata library is we want to identify the reports that cited this work, and we do that actively. But it really, when we can identify them, and when users share with us the research that they've done with our data, it really helps us in our programming and advocacy efforts. So thank you. There's access to the GCR indicator report on your right, and a short video snippet teaser of the new Refugee Data Portal on your left. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, colleagues from UNHCR, for this very interesting and insightful presentation. We will now basically go to the Q&A session of the webinar. And I want to ask people who have questions to put their hands up. Okay, I see a hand from Florence. Please go ahead, Florence.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. My question regarding the portal, we currently here in Niger, sorry, I'm from Astio, Niger, and we also develop platform with a web interface to do the following up of all the humanitarian development and peace and security projects, and develop it here in Niger. So my question is that regarding the refugee portal, UNHCR portal, can we access to data that are specific to our country, that is to say Niger? And also I saw that you work with API. Can we do the link with our platform so that we can implement it dashboard that will come directly from the information that are uploaded on your portal for Niger? Thank you.
Thanks, Florence. I think these are all questions that Lauren could probably respond to.
Yes, thank you, Florence. And it's exciting to hear. And the answer is absolutely. All of the data will be will include its ISO codes for the country, so it will be very easy for you to interact with it, and all of the data will be available via API, so you could connect with it directly. Thank you.
All right, short and sweet. So the answer is yes. Let me take another round of questions from the floor. I have enabled cameras and microphones as well. So if you have any questions for our three speakers, please just unmute yourself and ask your questions. Any other questions from the floor? I don't see any yet, so maybe this is a chance for me to take one of the questions from the registration form. Oh, now I see two hands. But maybe let me ask one question from the registration form first, and then I will go to the two hands, and we will take another round. But this is very much related to what Tarek mentioned at the beginning of this webinar about the challenges of funding for official statistics specifically. So one of the people who registered for this webinar has a question about that. And I wonder if Tarek could talk about how can you improve or maintain data quality given limited funding available now for the whole statistical system, not specifically for UNHCR, but almost globally. And after that, we'll take the two questions from the floor. Thanks.
Thanks very much. It's a very pertinent question, of course. We have unfortunately seen in the course of 2025 quite a shift on impact on data in the negative sense. I'm speaking about UNHCR particularly, but it also affects, of course, the wider humanitarian sector. So to give you a practical example, UNHCR has its own registration system, its case management system. We have close to 20 million refugees and asylum seekers pretty much registered on an individual basis in our database. So this is a protection tool for us, provide assistance and protection and solutions, of course. Now, before the funding crisis hit, we had on average more than 250,000 interactions with refugees and others on a monthly basis, meaning updating of records, verification of individual information, biodata, biometric data collection of refugees and stuff like that. This has dropped significantly in 2025, not because there are fewer refugees, but partly it's because the staff who did it in the past in the field are no longer available to conduct data collection, to verify individual records, to update records that are in our database. As a consequence, you can imagine this has direct impact on statistics because we rely heavily on individual information. And this had an impact on granularity of data. It had an impact on how quickly we get data, how fast refugees, for that matter, can get updated records, for example, death, birth, departures, resettlement, arrivals, and stuff like that, can be, to some extent, slower recorded. And this has an impact on assistance, has an impact on protection, of course, has an impact on access to those individuals. And I'm saying all of that to picture it a bit because all of it has an impact on statistics in the wider sense because we publish those numbers twice a year at global level, as you heard from Grace and Lauren earlier. So while it has been quite difficult, the activity continues at slower pace to some extent, while refugee numbers are not necessarily dropping by the millions yet. So it has an impact. We try to preserve quality as much as we can. Keeping in mind, we are a central sort of team in headquarters on the statistical side, but the impact is felt predominantly at the field level, where staff have been cut, those who collect data, who quality assure data, but also interact with governments. But by and large, in obtaining statistics, are to some extent no longer there. And just to frame it, we in UNHCR, as I mentioned, let's assume between 18 and 20 million records we keep in our own database for protection and solutions purposes and assistance purposes. But the biggest chunk of people who are globally displaced, either within the country or as refugees and asylum seekers, they're not in our book, they're not in our records because governments hold this data. So it means we have a heavy dependency on governments to provide those statistics. And here again, if the link between a humanitarian worker working on data and a government official basically supplying this data is broken because one of the two is no longer there, it has an impact on statistics in the broader sense. So we hope this will be reversed to some extent, given that data is so essential to understand the lives of refugees, to be determined how 2026 plays out. I hope I answered a bit the question here. Over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tarek. I mean, we all see the headlines, but thank you for putting the headlines into context and giving us the actual practical impact on the ground. And I agree with you that hopefully there will be a bit of reverse this year for funding for data and statistics. So I'll go to the next round of Q&A. I saw 2 hands up, but now I only see 1. I don't know if Youssef, you still have any questions and want to come in. If you do, please unmute yourself and do that. But if your question has already been answered, then I'll go to the next one. So I see.
Hi,
Yeah,
colleagues.
Youssef, you want to come in?
Yes, quickly, because I already put the question in the chat. But now that I have the mic, I can just see it loudly. So again, colleague, I thank you for the sharing. We will be surely sharing that presentation with our colleagues here in the country in Morocco. So I am Youssef Bouallela, the data manager at the RC office in Morocco. So thank you again. I think I go straight forward to say that maybe I didn't fully capture all the aspects of the presentation. I think there was a lot of details, and maybe we'll get back to you with regard to some good ideas that we can implement at country level. But from a country level perspective, let me just do some advocacy for the UN Info, because we don't see a lot of link with the UN Info and let's say with the system-wide information platforms. And I am not here trying to advocate for the RC mission because we are doing our mission in coordinating the data, but I am also advocating for the colleagues at the agency level. There is a lot of initiative at the global level, and I am sure that you ask them to help you, to give you all the data. But we also have the UN Info as the system-wide tool, and we are asking them for data. So maybe I didn't understand the link, if there is an effort also to help the colleagues not to have a double reporting, because they report to the global platforms. Sometimes agencies have more than one, and they also have to report to the UN Info. Another point, quickly, also is the link to the UN 2.0 agenda. Colleagues, again, I think we know all, and especially this group, that one of the most important discussion is data, is how the UN can give the right data, not just at global level, but at all levels, country level, agency level. It's all around. So we have to be clear, linked also to the UN 2.0 agenda. I think there is the data component, but we have to make sure also that it is linked to the other components, because it's not just right to say because we are working on a database that's just related to data, because there is the innovation part, there is a lot of other aspects. So thank you, colleagues, and yeah, thank you. Over.
Thanks a lot, Youssef. Your point is really about trying to avoid duplication of efforts. I wonder if any of the speakers want to respond to that point and have anything to say about that.
Well, I could answer first, and then I think Lauren could complement. So we have actually started discussion with UN Info colleagues about the API and what sort of data from the UN Info we could consume under our refugee data portal. I don't know, Youssef, I think you're familiar. There's actually a UN Common Pledge 2.0. It's one of the pledge under the Global Compact on Refugees. And so our aim is to see inclusion. So, for example, we wanted to understand how not just refugees, but other internally displaced and stateless persons are included in common country analysis, in joint work plans, and also the financing, all the other information that we see under UN Info. So I agree with you. This is a very rich source of data. And so if we could link that to our work on the refugee data portal, that is also our aim, and also develop indicators that measure progress of this, one of the more important pledges under the Global Compact on Refugee. And Lauren, maybe you can complement on our discussions with UN Info colleagues.
Yes, definitely. So I think in terms of kind of duplication, because the refugee data portal itself isn't necessarily a data like submission platform, it's more of a portal to publish out data. UN Info, we're looking at is a potential data source, and so kind of like Grace said, identifying what data in there would be relevant, and also making sure if there's data in there that can be crossed up with the data that we're publishing to make sure that, you know, we're using these international standards so that we can compare data from different sources and facilitate that type of analysis. But I very much appreciate your point, Youssef, as well, that it's not just about the data, it's about the whole process and the innovations and the different technologies we're using and the different standards. It's a lot, and there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen and should happen, and we're doing our best to do that in different forums that we are engaged in.
Thank you very much, Grace and Lauren, for responding to Youssef's very good points. I want to take a couple of more questions from the floor. So if there are still any burning question or comments on the topic, please do raise your hands. I see that there are also some questions on the chat and that our UNHCR colleagues have been replying to those questions as well. And thank you also for sharing links to the report and to the video teaser and to some other resources in the chat. Any other questions for our speakers from the floor? Please put up your hand. I don't see any other hands now. Please do put them up if you still have any other questions. We still have several minutes left, so let me maybe go back again to the questions that were submitted in the registration form. And I think this is something that perhaps Grace, as a co-author of the report, can basically speak a little bit more. I know that you already touched on some of this in your presentation, but the question is really about how do you ensure that the voices of the refugee themselves, are basically reflected in all the data and in the reporting, and that basically those voices drive actual actions. I mean, in your presentation, you talk about the human impact stories and the artworks and all of that, but can you say a few more words about this part of like basically including the voices of refugees in all the products?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a very good question. It's something that we aim to do, but also very difficult to do, and that's something that we're working actually, because in the forum itself, in the compact itself, there is a entire work stream on meaningful participation. So meaningful participation of refugees, and so we try to give guidance as well how that could be distilled further into the data work. But I could maybe share with you one example, which is the census in Morocco that included forcibly displaced population, stated population in the census, and they enlisted enumerators that have, in our jargon, we call it lived experience. So it could be former refugees, and actually what they learned from that experience is that really helped, not just to make the questionnaire much more effective in the translation, but also help gain the trust of the respondents during the census. So I think examples like that, where they could effectively inform data collection efforts, we hope to see much more, and also, like I said, it's an ongoing work. So to help, could probably come up with other ideas and other guidance of how meaningful participation can be strengthened in the data work. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Grace. Definitely, it's an ongoing effort, right, to try to include more and more of the kinds of inputs from refugees directly into a lot of these products. So certainly appreciate UNHCR's efforts to do that. Any other questions from the floor for our speakers? Don't be shy. I'll give you a last opportunity to ask any questions you may have to three speakers. But I don't see any hands. Perhaps let me just ask Lauren one last question, and then we can just wrap up. You mentioned that you would be very happy to hear from people if they have the right data sources that they want to share for the data portal and so on. How could they do that if there are data producers who are in this webinar who want to get in touch? How do they do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can reach out to me directly. My email link should be in the. Do we provide an email link? Nah, I guess. But you can reach out to me directly in the meantime, and then once the portal is up, we will have contact information, something more generic. But in the meantime, please reach out to me directly. Mm-hmm.
Right,
I can put my email in the chat too.
Yeah, that would be useful. So please do get in touch with Lauren if you think that you are already producing data that would be relevant for the portal. As Lauren mentioned, the portal is not producing data, it's consolidating and presenting the data from different sources. So I think to be able to kind of draw on what's already produced would be very useful. And with that, I think if there are no further questions, I would just like to again thank you to our three speakers for taking time out of their busy schedule and so early in the year to come and speak to us about this topic. It's very interesting, and we definitely look forward to following up the progress on the data portal. And whenever that is ready, we look forward to sharing it with the whole community as well. And to all of you who have joined, again, thank you so much for doing that. We have a very exciting slate of programs scheduled for the rest of the year, so please stay tuned with our Global Network LinkedIn group and also with our monthly newsletter for future events. And with that, I want to just ask everyone, if you can, to just unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and join me in giving a big round of applause to Tarek, Grace, and Lauren for their excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right, thanks everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Global Network webinar in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.